1.
Welcome to the Fourth Line Podcast, part of Full Press Radio. This is May 31st, 2021. With you today is myself, Carl, and Stevie Nick.
Carl, we are recording late tonight, and we have so much to talk about, so I want to get right into it. How do you feel about that?
I feel great. Yeah, we got a jam-packed show.
So about 10 minutes ago, the final buzzer went on Game 7, Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens. Montreal wins the game 3-1, and they win the series 4-3. They're off to Winnipeg to face the Jets in the second round. What do you think about all this?
I have so many thoughts, but literally the first thought that came to my mind as you were saying that was like, hey, 3-1 is like a fitting score for Montreal, since that was what Toronto was up in this series.
Oh man, that game, 5? That was the turning point, right? That Game 5, that overtime goal, that turnover from Galchenyuk at the blue line.
Yep.
That kind of felt like when the series got away from the Leafs.
I mean, forcing overtime in back-to-back elimination games feels like when this series got away from the Leafs. Like being down the way that the Leafs were in Game 6 felt like this series had gotten away from the Leafs.
Absolutely. They were chasing it from that point onwards. And yeah, they got a little close in Game 6, but they still chased it.
So much so.
You cannot be as good of a team as the Maple Leafs are during the regular season and be chasing games like that deep in the first round of the playoffs. It doesn't work.
No, well, and they're out again, right? They are out. I just look. Okay, here are the things I wrote down. 4 things about
Excellent.
this game and about this series. So,
okay, let's do it.
Thing number 1. Who do you think? And we're gonna, just so that you know, we are going to talk about the Canadiens. We're gonna save them for when we preview their series against the Jets. So right now, we're just gonna focus on some Leafsy things. Thing number 1. Worst player on the Leafs this series?
Objectively, Mitch Marner, but I think Austin Matthews is more on the hook than Marner is.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
1 goal.
Yeah.
From the Art Ross Trophy winner. Mm-hmm. Sorry, the Rocket Richard Trophy winner, whichever one is for the most goals in the league.
Rocket.
The Rocket. That's unacceptable. That is unacceptable.
See, I agree with the first part, because literally the note I wrote down was Marner. I thought he was, and I know that he became, especially in Game 6 and very much so tonight, he became that whipping boy for angry Leafs fans, that Marner was the problem. And I just saw repeatedly, we saw turnovers from him. We saw just incredibly weak puck play from him. Like anytime someone put a stick anywhere near him, he was falling over, he was giving up the puck, and he just was not doing anything. Austin Matthews was now having to carry Zach Hyman, who is a fine third fiddle, but he was having to carry Zach Hyman and the corpse of Mitch Marner. I don't blame him at all.
Zach Hyman was the best player on that line.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
That is a problem.
I agree with you. Mitch Marner looked like he had no confidence. He had no swagger. He had nothing. It was so frustrating to watch.
Well, that's one of my second points. My second point was the Leafs overthinking it. They were, and I know that oftentimes I make this case that there's no such thing as a playoff performer. You just are or are not. Tonight proved to me, for this team and this example, they were not the performers that they needed to be. They were in their own heads so much.
You know what I thought about pretty early in the game? How loudly their body language speaks. They had lost this game before the first period was over, and you could just tell by the way they carried themselves. Mitch Marner had his head hanging. Austin Matthews looked like he just didn't care. Like their body, you could tell by their body language, they had already beat themselves. So yeah, you're right. Like they might be overthinking a little bit. I almost think they were underthinking it in the sense that they just kept trying to do the same thing over and over and over again. There was zero creativity to their game. Montreal beat them. They outpositioned them. They outplayed them in the areas of the ice that mattered. And the Leafs didn't adjust.
Well, and that's them outplaying them in those positions that matter is really what I saw. Even I think what that late, there's the power play coming out in the third period tonight. And then even late when they had the goalie pulled, it seemed to me like no one wanted to be the one to be responsible. No one wanted to be the one who was like, I'm going to take that shot. So you saw so many so much overpassing, which is like a problem with this team to begin with, but just so much of that. And when Montreal's clogging up in front of the net, there's no point in doing that. Trying to get those cross-seam passes so that Austin Matthews or William Nylander can one-time it isn't going to work against this team. And yet, they tried.
Over and over and over again. And they kept trying with nobody in front of that. The goal they scored, they finally got some traffic in front of the net.
And they scored from the slot.
And they scored from the slot. Probably the only time in the game that happened. And they scored. Shocking.
Turns out when Carey Price sees every shot that you shoot from the point, he's going to stop him.
Yeah. And, let's talk about Carey Price for a minute, because he's the big narrative that's been on the broadcast, how great Carey Price has been. He was good. I don't think he was that great. I don't think he had to be that great.
No, he didn't.
He was playing against an underperforming Leafs team.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. He did make some big saves that on the other side, Jack Campbell didn't make. Right? Jack Campbell was also fine. Like, he wasn't great, but he was enough to win these games.
Yeah.
Carey Price made a few more saves that Jack Campbell didn't. And that's the difference. When you're having all these games going into overtime, you don't need large margins of victory. It's going to come down to those small things. And Montreal did all of those better than Toronto did.
Absolutely. And they played them consistently and they shut down the superstars. And Toronto failed to adapt. They couldn't figure out how to get out from under that.
So my last point that I had, and I've now come up with a fifth point.
Okay, good.
Johnn Tavares out for 6 2/3 of this series, 6 games and 2/3 of the 7. With how close this series was, I mean, tonight was not. Tonight they were down 2-0, right? Essentially losing at that margin. With Tavares in, does Toronto win this series?
Yes. I think so. I think the Tavares thing rocked them early. Like, I think that first game, they wouldn't have lost that game if that Tavares incident doesn't happen.
So you're saying not even just skill-wise, but like mentally, focus-wise, all those things.
Yes.
That's why they lost. Not just the fact that they lost their second line center.
I think that's why they lost that first game. The air was sucked out of them in that game. Like, the air was sucked out of me in that game. That incident was horrific. And I think that's why they just couldn't rally in that first game. The rest of it, I think they were missing their second line center. I think they were missing the stability that he brought to that team. And in game 7, I think they were missing their best defenseman.
Right. So losing Muzzin, losing Tavares, now you've got both of them out. Definitely. I mean, foundation and building wise, then I look at this team and I know that I assume, even though I'm not looking at it right now, I assume that social media is currently like firing Kyle Dubas and blowing up this entire roster. I assume that's what's happening.
I mean, it's Maple Leaf social media. So yeah, probably. That's basically what happens every year.
Right. But with that being the case, with a freak injury to their captain, in game 1 of the series with Muzzin being out. Do they need to do anything to this team in this offseason, or just run it back and hope that you can get better?
That's a big question, though. Like, what more can you do? Last year, it was all about this team. They're too soft. They need to get tougher. They need to get, they need experience and ruggedness on this roster. So they went and added that. Didn't get them very far this year.
They went and traded a first-round pick for Nick Foligno and then sat him for some of the series.
10 games they got out of him. Yeah. And an empty net goal.
Still more than Marner had.
Whoa. What are you going to do? Like, you're not going to move Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares.
Mostly because you can't. I mean, like,
you can't.
Caps are locked up this year. What are you going, like, are you literally just going to give these guys away? Because you're selling them at their lowest if you try to sell. I mean, Nylander, I think, had a great series. Nylander was the best player on the Leafs offensively.
Absolutely. Easily.
Yeah, right? Wasn't close.
Yeah.
So, and you're not selling Matthews after the Rocket. So what, you're going to get rid of Marner?
No, Marner's not going anywhere.
You can't. No one's going to give you what you want with the price tag on him. Sure, he is the worst of those 4 in this playoff round, but regular season, he can still perform.
Yeah, he's part of the reason they finished first in their division. I don't know. I really don't think you tinker much with this roster. There's the questions about Thornton and Spezza and what you do with those roster spots, but you're not going to mess with the core.
No, that core is staying. You've found a quality replacement for Freddie Anderson. Jack Campbell was not the reason they lost this series.
Absolutely not.
He's still signed this year. Freddie's not. Now you can afford to say, hey, Freddie, you want back here? Which maybe he doesn't. I wouldn't probably. He's a free agent. The aforementioned Zach Hyman, he is, but like, it's role players that are leaving.
Yeah, and role players can be replaced. I think Hyman's one that'll sting if he leaves. I think they want a guy like Hyman on that roster. He's part of that core identity.
Well, and he's been here with all of them through this whole time as well.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think it's Kyle Dubas' fault. I think he's built a good team. He's mostly stuck to his guns through the whole thing. It's not on the goaltending. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we see this all the time in the league. Is these teams remember when Tampa tied the NHL historical best regular season in points and they got swept by the 8th seed in the playoffs in the first round?
And then won the Stanley Cup by running back the exact same roster the next year.
Like, this happens. Washington went through this. Pittsburgh went through this. Tampa went through this. The Leafs can't overreact to this. The only thing that makes them in a much harder position than those teams I just rattled off is the market that they're in, the fan base that they have, and the scrutiny that they're under with their local media.
And that is the biggest difference between them. That you, like, in some of those markets, you can disappear and not have to worry about it, not have to answer so much the next day, not have to feel that pressure. But then you've got those guys that want to go to that market to feel that pressure, to do that, to be the one to bring Toronto a cup. So we've got it both ways.
Yeah, we do. Now, there's one. I had one. You had 5 notes. I have one and that I want to talk about. I don't think they should fire the GM. I don't think they should trade away their core players. Let's talk about their coach, because I think Sheldon Keefe got out-coached this series.
I agree.
So to me, like, when we're talking about where does the issue lie, he very quickly shoots to the top of my list. And that's a question mark for me on this team is, do you stick with your young, relatively inexperienced coach, or do you go out and find somebody who has experience winning in the playoffs, dealing with star players, learning when to let them be creative and when to make them stick to the systems and how to adjust to how the other team is playing? Because I didn't see a lot of that from Sheldon Keefe.
No, you didn't. And the line changes, they just continue to be the same thing. Zero in-game adjustments, even from that, right? I kept waiting for Nylander and Marner to switch on a line, even just for a shift, even just for a period when you're down 2-0 in a game, to try it. And nothing in game, not much between games. I don't know. We talked about earlier how they kept just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It kind of felt to me, and which is interesting because I didn't feel this way during the regular season about this team. It just felt like their creativity was stifled. Like they didn't feel like they were able to just go out and play the way they wanted to play. They were stuck to these systems and these plays, and I'm not going to make you beat me out, but the drop pass, stop with the drop pass. It's not working. You're not getting through the neutral zone. Unleash the creativity of these star players, these elite hockey players. And it just never happened. No, we didn't see it. So I would not, I know that I assume that they will not replace Sheldon Keefe, but I do not blame them if that's the choice that they want to make. If they can bring in someone.
There's good options out there. Mike Babcock's available.
Could you imagine?
I kid.
I know they would never, but hey,
they won't.
We can sit here.
They're still paying him, so they could.
Would they have to sign him to a new contract, or could they just be like, Mike, you're back, get in here?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure what the legalities of all that is.
I know, because if you buy a player out and then re-sign him, you still have to pay him both contracts.
That's probably true for the coaches too. Who knows? Maybe they lump summed him when they let him go. Here's your severance package. Take your 50 mil and you're gone.
Well, let's turn our attention then from Toronto to Montreal, Winnipeg. Montreal now heads to Winnipeg. That series is getting started on Wednesday. No time for rest for the North Division, since the rest of the league literally couldn't wait for them to finish. They've already started the second round. Montreal and Winnipeg are getting started theirs on Wednesday.
I mean, they couldn't wait for them to start the first round either.
No, they're like, look, the North, you're in a different place. You've got 250 fans in the arena. We've got full barns. We're not going to wait for you. We're not making any money off of this.
The league was just counting on Edmonton and Toronto for, quick wins in the first round so they could catch up with the rest of the league.
Yeah. Here we have Toronto blowing it and not doing it. So
both of them blowing it. We got two underdogs meeting in the second round in the North Division.
It's true. So, okay. So this is what we have. We have Winnipeg that swept Montreal. That, I mean, if you want to frame it in a way, they got pushed to 7 games by the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So what are you expecting from this? Because these teams match up to play some pretty similar hockey.
That's kind of what I was thinking. It's going to be, I think, a tighter series physically. I think Winnipeg got through in 4, similar to the way that Montreal got through in 7. So it'll be interesting to see how these teams match up. I think I still like Winnipeg. And I realize I've been, Boston just scored to tie it up.
Boston did. Brad Marchand.
Did you see that? Oh boy. Anyways.
Maybe the Islanders should stop giving the Bruins power plays. Just a tip.
It would help. I realize I keep underestimating Montreal over and over. We didn't even have them making the playoffs this year, Carl.
And we shouldn't have. And we shouldn't have had them beating the Leafs. And yet here we are.
So we shouldn't have them going through to the third round.
No, we shouldn't.
I certainly don't. I think Winnipeg's goalie's been better than Montreal's. I think that, Winnipeg doesn't have maybe not the elite talent. They don't have as much elite talent as Montreal does, or as Toronto did.
Oh, okay. I would say they have more elite talent than Montreal.
They do have, but they don't have as much as Toronto did. So I think they're more, they'll play more of a grinding style. It's not like they're playing down to Montreal's level. They're kind of at Montreal's level, with a little bit above it.
Well, I think I wanted to say that Winnipeg does everything Montreal does just a little bit better than they do. I think that Montreal does do a better job, and it'll be interesting to see, because Phillip Danault did a great job against that top line defensively this series. And so it'll be interesting to see how, presumably, him lining up against the Scheifele line in this coming series, how that works, right? How that matchup and that line works, because Montreal still, better goaltending in Winnipeg. As much as, Carey Price was good, he is not Connor Hellebuyck. And I would say that Carey Price was the better goalie the last series. They will not have that happen in Winnipeg. Offensively, yeah, Winnipeg's not as good as Toronto, but they are better than Montreal is.
Yes.
Defensively, I would say that Winnipeg is worse. Montreal is the better team defensively than Winnipeg.
Yeah, but don't you think it comes down to Winnipeg's offense versus Montreal's defense?
Typically it is offense versus defense. So yes.
I think Winnipeg's offense is better suited to deal with Montreal's defense.
What makes you say that?
I'm trying to avoid the word tough, and I realize I just used it. I find they're more willing to go to the dirty areas and play a little harder. I'm especially talking about the front of the net. Winnipeg does a lot more damage there than Toronto did in this series anyways.
If you want to make that comparison, you literally just have to look at the difference between Mitch Marner and Blake Wheeler and see, right? You've got that winger going to the front of the net. That's going to happen.
Winnipeg's going to crash the net hard.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That's going to be a fun series to watch.
It's going to be a good series. I think I'm going to take Winnipeg. Probably in not that many games, like 5 or 6. I
would go 6 for Winnipeg, just because. And I want to say 5, but Montreal made me look like a fool in the first round, so I'm going to hedge my bets. And
Montreal made literally everybody look like a fool in the first round.
I was going to say, I did not check our bracket group to see who picked Montreal, because some did, because they're like, of course Montreal's going to win, just as like a troll without actually meaning it. But hey, here we are. All right. The North is done. Let's head out west, Nick. Let's talk about something happier.
Big game last night. Game 1. Colorado, Vegas.
A lot happened in that game, not just like goals wise. Colorado Avalanche did score a touchdown.
Yeah. So game. What was the final score? Because I turned it off after the second period. It was 7-1.
The final score was 7-1 Colorado.
Oh, who saw that coming?
I think a lot of people saw Colorado winning, but you cannot predict 7 goals.
Did any of their matchups in the regular season come close to that kind of goal differential?
It's a great question. I think back to like those Lake Placid games, and that really skews their season series because 2 of their games were on blinding ice that had to get canceled.
Yeah.
But those games were not particularly I think to the first one, I think Colorado won 5-2, I want to say.
I'm trying to look it up, but Hockey Reference is glitching out on me right now.
All right, here we go. 2-1 Colorado. 5-2 Vegas. 5-1 Colorado. 3-2 Vegas. They haven't played much since the beginning of the year. They've played 4 games early in the year. 1-0 Vegas, 3-2 Colorado, 3-2 Colorado, and 3-0 Vegas. So no, there was a 5-1 win in there for Colorado, but nothing like that.
Nothing. And I'm sure even, the momentum in that 5-1 game was nothing like what we saw last night. Like last night was barely even a competition. Like Colorado They were all over that game from the very first puck drop in the first period.
So the first question that I have for you, because we came into that and coming off a 7-game series they did have a day off in between. They didn't go straight in, but still only a day off. Vegas made the decision after playing Marc-Andre Fleury for all 7 games against Minnesota to sit him and go Robin Lehner in this game. Giving up 7 goals, hindsight being what it was, what would you think that score would be if Fleury had been in net instead?
I think they still would have lost. I don't know if the score would have been run up that much, though. Because here's what happens if Fleury's in net, right? And let's say, what was the score after the end of the first period? 3-0, 2-0?
I believe 2-0.
Like after that third or fourth goal, Fleury comes out of that game. They couldn't pull Lehner last night.
You can't put the backup in. I know a very good backup, but you can't pull him to put in the starter.
Not when your whole plan is to just rest your starter. Like it wasn't going to happen. If Fleury's in net and starts that game and he lets in 2 quick ones or 3 quick ones, you can swap him out and you put Lehner in, and maybe you stem the bleeding at 3. You get, maybe you come a little close to tying it. Maybe you tie it up. All you want to do is get within 1, right? Because then anything can happen in those dying minutes of the game.
Yeah. Especially with the talent Vegas has.
Yeah. They should have started Fleury.
I mean, hindsight being what it was, yes. I think they should have. I mean, even before hindsight, I think you can check the old tweeters. I'm pretty sure I questioned that decision even beforehand. Fleury played incredibly well, and he hasn't played any back-to-backs. They're going to have an extra day off between, I believe, game 1 and 2. I think their next game isn't until Wednesday.
Yep.
Does Fleury need 5 days off? No. Give him the extra 2 after game 1 and run it back.
The whole rest thing felt a little excessive to me, especially with the two-day break after game 1.
Yeah. So we've got that happening. We also had a suspension coming out of this game today. Ryan Reaves suspended 2 games for and they deemed it roughing and unsportsmanlike conduct for kneeing on the head of Ryan Graves.
So I watched like the replay of that and I didn't really see much. And then when I was reading about it, it was like he had his knee on his head. He pulled out some of his hair. What was Ryan Reaves doing?
He fully lost all sense of what he should be doing.
And he got suspended for it.
And he did.
Interesting.
So 2 games with what we've seen from the Department of Player Safety. I actually think 2 games is a fair suspension for what we've seen for other things recently.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's appropriate. I think it's appropriate that they suspended him. It's almost like if we don't, there's going to be a line brawl in the next game and we should avoid that.
It's almost like, I mean, Colorado's not going to line up and have a line brawl opening period of game 2. They would probably just like Vegas puts out their 4th line and Colorado's like, all right, we'll counter with MacKinnon and go score.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. Like how many times we have to, I feel like every week we're talking about the Department of Player Safety and how inconsistent they are with these rulings. They got it right this time. I don't have any faith that this puts them on the right track.
No, I don't either. Sorry, I'm just making a note for something later in the show if we have time. Okay, so we have Vegas now missing Ryan Reaves. And I honestly, in a lot of situations, and I'm not sure who's going to slot in for him, but there's a lot of times that Vegas is better off without him in the lineup because he does these kinds of stupid things. If you do that in a 7-1 game, it doesn't hurt him. It doesn't hurt the team, but he doesn't just do these in those situations. And there are times when you need him You need a player on the ice. You don't need a penalty being taken. You don't need someone running someone. Sure, a big hit is important, but scoring goals is also important.
It's true. There are times where you need a player on the ice. Ryan Reaves knows that. Because the need has a K in front of it. Get it? But like, yes. Okay. Ryan Reaves, he overreacted here. But don't you think that I think that there's some value to having a guy like Ryan Reaves on the ice in a series like this. I think the Avalanche are in a better position with someone like Ryan Reaves out of the series.
But like, we don't see Colorado having someone like that on the ice. They had some guys like that previously, and they went away from it.
Yeah.
If Colorado, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
If Colorado wins this Stanley Cup, this is the time when I am thrilled to see that this narrative of you have to have a tough guy, you need to bulk up, you need to bring in Nick Foligno and Wayne Simmons and Joe Thornton and Patrick Maroon and all these guys. You need to do that to win a Stanley Cup. Just have really fast, really skilled players who can score 7 goals in the opening game of a series and go win games.
I agree with you. We're just in such a weird hybrid place in the league right now and in the game, where some teams have these enforcers, some teams don't. And it means that Gabriel Landeskog has to drop the gloves and fight.
And if they try to pull your hair and knee on your players, kick them out of the game, because there's no place for that. Officials got to do their job and take care of that and get rid of it. If you're leaving it up to the players, that's the reason we still have it, because the officials don't get rid of it, even though the NHL is in, like you said, this weird spot.
The league kind of wants to still leave it up to the players because they have a former player who played that role running this whole department. I mean, we just went through this with the Tom Wilson situation. The league said, let's let the players sort it out on the ice.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, Carl. I don't know.
You're
Ryan
right.
Reaves is not going to go out and win the game for the Vegas Golden Knights. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens the rest of this series.
We've spent this whole series preview talking about the Vegas Golden Knights, though. You don't want to say anything about your Avalanche?
I think I said plenty of things. We talked about how you just have a lot of skill. I look forward to having, Gabe Landeskog, Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen are playing incredibly well. Cale Makar's looking fantastic. Devon Taves is the great defensive and good puck moving defenseman that we paid 2 second-round picks. 2 second-round picks for Devon Taves. Come on. New York Islanders.
I'm going to say 3 things about your team, and then we can move on. 1, Gabe Landeskog's going to win the Conn Smythe this year. We talked about this in our chat. I believe that if they win the cup, Gabe Landeskog is the Conn Smythe trophy winner. 2, Nathan MacKinnon is not even next level. He's so far above next level, and he showed that last night. He was 3 strides ahead of every other player on the ice.
Hey, he literally got the puck at the blue line, like you said, 3 strides, probably 3 strides away from the defenders. Those defenders still could not get over to stop him. He got behind them and then scored a wide open goal with both of them.
Beautiful.
It was a 1-on-2, and he made them look silly.
It wasn't even close. He was so far ahead of them.
It was magical. And I mean, this is when I think back, and they talked about it last night in the broadcast, right? You think back to the Lake Tahoe games when Alex Pietrangelo had MacKinnon coming in on him, and his response was, "Uh-oh," and then fell over and MacKinnon scored. Yeah, right. And Vegas needs to learn that, right? They knew that. They saw it again last night, and you have to give him. You need to be coming even further in. You cannot go out to Nathan MacKinnon. You need to just collapse in and try to block his space.
Absolutely. And the third thing, that Cale Makar, he's a special player, man. He is. There were times I was watching that game, I'm like, What is he doing in the crease? And he had the puck the entire time. He's fun to watch. I'm excited to watch a lot more of this team.
Me too. Here's the last thing that I want to say. The Colorado Avalanche can go 11-9 the rest of the way and win the Stanley Cup.
That's crazy.
And I know that every team that won game number 1 can also say that, but I just felt like pointing it out.
Well, we'll see how they do Wednesday night. I have a feeling it's not going to be as easy as last night was. But after watching the game last night, I feel very confident in the Avalanche's ability to win this series.
What do you think this series goes?
I'm trying to remember what I submitted. I think I said Colorado in 6.
Do you change it to 5 now, or do you still think 6?
No, I still think 6.
I mean, they can go 3, and I guess that wouldn't be 3-3. That would be 3-2 the rest of the way. And I'm fine. I mean, I think that's very doable. Vegas is a good team. They are going to win games in this series, especially with that extra day off. I think that helps. It absolutely helps Vegas more than it helps Colorado.
Oh, for sure. Colorado had a bunch of time off.
Yeah, they did not need 2
They don't need
extra
the rest.
days.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, why don't we? I mean, I could sit here and talk about the Avalanche the rest of the show.
Yeah, I know you could.
But that's not what we're here for. We'll just look, we're going to get to talk more about the Avalanche as this playoff goes on. And I'm not even right now. I'm just happy Avalanche fan. Sad Avalanche fans right around the corner. We both know that.
We'll see where you're at next week.
So we'll be back next week. We'll see where I'm at. Let's take a break right now. We'll be back on the other side talking about Tampa, Carolina, and the Islanders, Boston, which looks like it's heading to overtime. 3, 2, 1.
So we've talked about the North. We've talked about the West. Let's talk about what I think is going to be the next most exciting series, which is the Tampa Bay Lightning and Carolina Hurricanes.
I think it's going to be the closest series and the most fun.
Right? I've got this one going 7 games.
Same. Yeah.
I still can't bet against Tampa, though.
Why would you?
They're just too good. Like, and when you go like up and down and throughout the lineup, and you want to let's start with goaltending. Tampa has the edge. Andre Vasilevsky's probably going to win the Vezina Trophy. Maybe is going to win the Vezina Trophy.
I mean, Philip Grubauer's in the conversation, so probably not. But hey,
yeah. Well, so is Andre Vasilevsky. Had a great first round. You look at defense. Carolina's has one of the best D-cores in the league. Tampa has one of the best defensemen in the league.
And also has some pretty good depth. They're not as deep as Carolina is, but like
really
said,
good support.
Stacked. Yeah.
Stacked. Forwards. Carolina has a very young, high potential forward core. Tampa has a very elite, experienced forward core. Like, I don't know, when it comes down to it, are you putting do you feel that Stamkos, Kucherov, Point have the edge over Aho, Svechnikov, and I don't know, Jordan Staal, Martin Necas?
I mean, and that's part of the reason why I give the edge to Tampa on that, right? I mean, those 3 of Point, Kucherov, Stamkos, any one of them can be the one per night, and you don't need them all to be going. And with Carolina, you do need some of them, especially Nino Niederreiter, likely out for the entirety of this series.
It's a big blow for them.
So that's going to be a big piece that they need to fill. Fortunately, they do have little Sebastian going. So that's good.
Which is great. Carolina, I was so confident about this team going into the playoffs. My confidence has been shaken a little after that first round.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Even the game that they won the series on, that game 6 overtime, you mentioned Aho. He scored that game-winning goal in overtime kind of accidentally. I don't know how intentional it was. Like, there just didn't seem to be a ton of, it felt a little more lucky than I would have wanted it to be. I would have really liked them to take more control of that series and win in a more demanding fashion. They just felt a little shaky to me, a little nervous, anxious.
I mean, we knew that UC Saros, you just had to keep putting pucks on net because he was going to stop the majority of them. So,
and he did.
You were going to have to get lucky to get one past him.
Yeah. Tampa, on the other hand, they won in 6 as well, but they didn't look that shaky. They were pretty confident throughout that whole series. And the games that they won pretty confidently.
Yeah. I mean, Tampa also didn't have the easiest of time in their matchups. Like, no, granted, they didn't. The Panthers were a better team than the Predators, but both of them, I think, had a similar difficult situation to have to overcome. And I think that was good. I think like we saw and we got them ready for this matchup, which is they're going to have to be on their best. I was going to say their best behavior. I mean, they have to be on their best behavior. You don't want to get suspended like Mr. Reaves, but
at the top of their game. Absolutely. So that first game, because we've got one game done already.
Tampa up 1-0 in the series after that 2-1 win yesterday.
Game 2 is tomorrow. Like, how are you feeling about this after that first game?
I still feel like it's anyone's game. I mean, literally, I was not able to watch that game live. And I watched the first period and a half.
It was on at a weird time.
It was on at a weird time. And so watched that, and then literally the game ended, and I was like, I didn't even realize that they had gone up Tampa. Like it was a very close match the whole way. And I honestly think that they can continue to do this. I think it's going to be continue to be close the rest of the way. And like you said, I think this is going 7. I think that both teams are going to have their time, but I think the biggest thing is going to come down to a lot. And I know that we talk about this a lot in every series, but especially when you have a power play like Tampa's being able and Carolina to be able to keep them off the ice. Tampa going into this playoffs is clocking in 39% so far this playoffs on the power play. You cannot be giving them chances like that. So you've got to shut that down. Even yesterday, I mean, 2 of the 3 goals in that game were on the power play. Beans and points, both power play goals. Because Tampa, Carolina is a good team. Their power play, not as good, especially in the playoffs, but like Tampa's penalty kill is not that great. Mm-hmm. So for the same, like Tampa needs to stay out of the box because they're not great at stopping them. Carolina needs to stay out of the box because Tampa's going to keep scoring. And I think you need to be able to do that. And I think that will probably be what this series comes down to, is because it's going to be so close. It's going to be those very small differences.
And didn't Carolina take something like 5 penalties yesterday?
Yeah, it was
not good. And I honestly, Carl, I thought of you because we talked about how against Tampa, you can't take penalties against this team. And I was like, 5 penalties. Woof. That's not good.
No.
They got to reel that in.
So it was the other. Tampa was the one that took 5. Carolina
Tampa
had 5
took
power
5
plays. Yeah.
Okay.
But still,
so I got that wrong.
There was 8 power plays in that game yesterday, and that's not how these teams need to play. They need to stop that for game 2.
Absolutely. Can we talk about Carolina's goalie?
Yeah, Ned. It's way easier to just call him Ned.
Oh, that's great. Okay, great. Where did he come from, and why is he so good?
It's a great question.
Is he enough to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning?
I think so. I mean, they managed to do this with Peter Mrazek and James Reimer in previous renditions, and he's better than they are. So yeah, I think that Ned is certainly enough to get this done for them.
He's if they're gonna do it, he's their guy.
Well, that's the thing, right? He is their bona fide number one at this point in time. He's been quite good this year. And as you said, kind of came out of nowhere. He's been kind of around the Hurricanes for some time, but never really got the chance to do this. Injuries led to him getting this opportunity this year, and he ran with it.
Interesting time. So I've got Tampa in 7.
I also would have Tampa in 7. Which brings us to the final series, which is currently 3 minutes into overtime of game number 2. And while this is also, I mean, any series that's in overtime is going to be a close one. Boston handily won game number 1. And I felt like this was going to be the bounce back for the Islanders. It was up 3-1 for the Islanders this game. Blew it.
Third period.
Overtime. And this seems to me, I'm looking at this series, and this is the definitive game. Like, this moment we're in right now is what turns the tide from a coin flip in 7 versus Bruins in 5.
It certainly feels that way. And if I'm being honest with you, I'm leaning more Bruins in 5 than a coin flip in 7. Even if the Islanders win this one.
Yeah. So you think even the Islanders do this, you think Boston's hands down better team?
Yes. And I say that mostly because of the Islanders' first round. Going into the playoffs, I was very confident about the Islanders.
I mean, probably the Oilers too. Maybe less.
I was very confident about the Oilers, but we don't have to talk about them anymore. Not until next season. We don't have to talk about the Oilers. I was very confident about the Islanders going into the playoffs. That Pittsburgh series shook my confidence in this team a little bit, because their victory over the Penguins should have been more clear than it was. Because I think what it came down to is just Tristan Jarry was not good.
This was, I mean, I know that you said yesterday watching that Tampa game that you thought of me because of all the penalties. Every time I watched the Penguins play, I thought of you because we just saw moment after moment of Tristan Jarry making poor choices.
He was not good. He was not good. And you got to wonder what the outcome of those games are if Marc-Andre Fleury was in net for the Penguins.
I mean, is this the episode where we wonder what the outcome would be if Marc-Andre Fleury was in net? Do it in Vegas. Maybe just start Marc-Andre Fleury. Maybe that's the lesson we need to learn here, people.
Get with it, NHL. Hey, Kyle Dubas, you want your next move? Go get Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, I think his contract might be up after this year. So,
dude,
that seems smart.
No word of a lie. I was listening to the Elliot Friedman podcast this weekend, and he said the Penguins last year tried trading for Marc-Andre Fleury.
Hey, literally right now, there's nothing I want more than the Leafs to go get Marc-Andre Fleury. That is the off-season move I want. Thank you for bringing that to my life.
Don't you think it kind of makes sense, though?
It makes a ton of sense.
Like Jack Campbell as a starter, and you got your seasoned vet as that backup / guy who can step in key moments.
I was going to say, Marc-Andre Fleury is taking that net. Like by week 3, that's Marc-Andre Fleury's net, and he's not giving that up.
He's going to play 55 games.
Exactly. And then he'll get benched for game 2 of the 3rd round. And the people will be like, why? I mean, he's old. We need to rest him. We need him fresh. And then they lose. But goaltending in this Islanders Bruins series is they made the flip in this game. Ilya Sorokin to the bench, Semyon Varlamov in net for the Islanders. And I think I know I said it about Vegas that was a mistake. The Islanders did do a better job than really any team, especially teams in the playoffs, of splitting the net. And And so you shouldn't think that would be an issue, but Ilya Sorokin has clearly been the better goaltender of late. One game against the Bruins aside in that game one, I think they should have stuck with him.
I know, but it's the playoffs, man. There's like, you don't have a bunch of time to just run him and let him figure it out. I think, unlike Vegas, I think they made the right call on this one.
Even with, I haven't been able to fully focus on like the play surrounding those goals because we've been doing this podcast.
Of course,
even with that blown lead, like they were up 3-1.
They lost 5-1.
Yeah, but that was a game that was out of hand.
I don't know, man. It's just let's say you don't, and it's another 5-1 game. Now you're down 2 in the series. I don't know. We're dealing in hypotheticals here. It's hard with the playoffs. The time doesn't exist to correct after the fact. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the right decision is. I'm not an NHL coach. For that reason, I couldn't do it.
So Semyon Varlamov's net the rest of this series, win or lose this game?
No, I don't think I have that much confidence in his performance.
Okay. And that's what
this is why, Carl. Look, if I was a coach of an NHL team, people would walk into my office on game day and I'd be laying down in the fetal position, sucking my thumb. And they'd be like, Coach, what do you want to do for goalies? And I'm like, I don't know. You decide.
Here's a coin.
Exactly. But on the other hand, Tuukka Rask, opposite of Tristan Jarry so far.
And he's everything that the Bruins need him to be.
So that's going to make it more difficult for this Islanders series. Did that puck just hit the post?
That Islanders shot across the crease?
A Bruin shot.
Yes, right. The Bruin shot. Yeah. I don't believe it did. Okay. I don't think so. It was real close.
That was close.
You might have seen my face react.
Your feed is ahead of mine.
I'm watching it on cable right now. That's why.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on stream.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's your prediction for this series?
I'm thinking, I think it'll be Bruins win. I think Bruins win. I don't think we're rid of Boston yet. And I think 6. And if they lose tonight, or if they win tonight, it's 5.
I submitted Bruins in 5 to the Gord Ambrose Hockey Pool.
There we go. Speaking of the Gord Ambrose Hockey Pool, I know we haven't talked too much about that, but there is something much more important than the Gord Ambrose Hockey Pool that happened in relation to that this weekend. Hockey Night in Canada this week.
Hockey Night in Canada this week.
First intermission, there was a segment.
There was a segment on Aaron Ambrose. That's right. Thank you for reminding me. That totally slipped my mind. Aaron did, Aaron Ambrose is, I'm part of the Ambrose clan. She's the first cousin of my wife, and she's been on the show before, and we've talked hockey. She's a defenseman for Team Canada and for Team Bauer in the most recent PWHPA showdown. They did a great segment on her in the first intermission and about her kind of struggles with mental health and through the last few years of her career. And it was a beautiful segment, and we watched it and my wife was in tears. We were so proud of her for, she's always kind of worn her heart on her sleeve and spoken honestly about her experiences, but this is on a whole other stage and other level. And it was a great segment. I don't know if you ended up seeing it afterwards, Carl, but I encourage everyone to go and check it out. I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Erin does, you mentioned what she does for mental health, but also just the great work that she does promoting women's hockey and being a great part of the Secret Dream Gap tour that they're doing. And, congrats to them for their finals and finishing that up over in Calgary. Do you know where they're heading next?
I don't know where they're heading next. No.
But that's what's great. As things continue to open up, this is going to be a great opportunity for, especially as, most markets in Canada do not currently have hockey. This is going to be the best opportunity. I would bet that by the time they're done this, they're going to be having packed arenas being able to check this out because, I mean, there's nothing else to watch, and it's a fantastic thing to go and see.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait for it to get up and running again.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. One last thing before we wrap the show. Seth Jones reportedly not returning to the Columbus Blue Jackets, which begs two questions. One, what should the Jackets be doing? Should they trade him this year? He has 1 year left on his deal. Is this an off-season trade for them?
Yes. You trade him. Absolutely. Now's the time to do it. It's clear he's not coming back. Part ways and get what you can for him.
That said, then, where do you think Seth Jones ends up?
Oh, I don't know. That's a whole other, like, that's a big question and probably a big debate because, you know, 1 year of Seth Jones, what is that worth? Now, if you can get Seth Jones for 1 year and then extend him, that's a different question. I don't know who's going to have the assets to trade for Seth Jones right now. Like, what do you think that kind of player yields in return?
I mean, a first, a prospect, especially for like the full season. If they do a trade like pre-draft this year or at the draft, which is usually like the big time because you have a little more flexibility even in this offseason. I think you get a first, a prospect, and a player and a roster player. Like it's big.
It's huge, and teams in position to do that are probably more middle ground teams, right? Right? Like I'm thinking like the Columbuses, the Dallases, not Columbus, Minnesota. Honestly, Minnesota and Columbus are the same team in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean Minnesota is a team. I mean, they don't have like the super deep. They're kind of been in that like mid-tier prospect doldrums that teams get into, right? And I think
that's the kind of team that needs a player like that.
I think that would be great. I mean, you have him on that team, adding him to Matt Dumba and being able to kind of, you know, Jared Spurgeon this year. I think that would be a great addition to the Wild. I think Dallas is another one with, I think Goligoski's contract's up. I know that they've got a great stacked defense core. Could you imagine Heiskanen and Seth Jones on the same power play?
That'd be huge.
That'd be fantastic.
He's going to end up in New York, though. Let's be honest. Everyone wants to go to New York.
Yeah, that would
somehow
be
the Rangers always get these types of players.
That'd be the Rangers have prospects galore. They can easily part with a first round pick.
They could make that happen.
Absolutely. I mean, they're going to get the first round. They're going to win the lottery again this year, so it doesn't matter.
No, get out of here.
So so they win the lottery, they trade next year's first because they're going to be banned from the lottery next year because of the Ranger rule. So I think that's going to be fine. There we go. Well, we had a ton to get through this week, but we have right now a very important thing that we need to do, Nick, which is crown a winner in this round's high sticking contest.
Yeah.
So while I pull that up and run through the numbers real quick one last time, I'm going to let you know how this works. If you go to our Twitter, which is at Fourth Line Podcast, and pick over or under for each game that we play with. We've been sending it out in the mornings. One thing that's fun about this is we got to wait for the lines. Now, granted, almost all of them are 5.5 through this entire playoff. So you tell us, do you think the goal total is going to be over or under that betting line for each game? And if you're right, you get a point. Every point is a name in a hat. We're going to draw those names coming up right now. Every point is a name in a hat. Those points go into a draw for a prize from the Store Next Door, which is a fantastic place that helps the community, local initiative, hiring people in the community, and using sticks that would have ended up in the garbage to create amazing things. They've got hat racks, they've got tables, they've got clocks, they've got all kinds of things. You win, we're going to send you a list. You pick one of the things you want on there, and we're going to get that sent out to you free of charge as a thank you for playing, as a thank you for tuning into the show, and just a way for us to give back to the community by supporting an amazing store and our amazing listeners, because Let's be honest, Nick. We got the best listeners out there.
Absolutely, we do.
So let's see here. I'm going to very quickly do some math. I'm going to go do a random number. We have 57 names in the hat this week. So I'm going to put random number between 1 and 57. What do you think it's going to be?
I think it's going to be 39.
It is 7. Lucky number 7. So if it was 39, it would have been friend of the show, Brody. Unfortunately, it is not for Brody. It was number 7, which is Scott Castro. Congratulations, Scott. You are the winner of this round's prize from the store next door. So thank you very much to him for playing. Thank you to everyone for playing. Scott will get that sent out to you very shortly. And you can keep playing. We'll be playing through the second round. I've got some points to hand out. Those are going to go into this next round's pool. Because, again, the NHL starts the first round, the second round. It all gets confusing. We're just going to count those as second round games. So we'll have those handed out shortly. But keep on playing. We'll have some every day, especially tomorrow. There's only one game. So let's just play. Tampa, Carolina, probably going to be 5.5. You pick. Goal total over or under. It was under for game 1. We'll see. You can find out more about the show at thefourthlinepodcast.com. As I said, on Twitter at fourthlinepodcast, mail at thefourthlinepodcast.com if you want to send us an email. Until next time.
It's time for us to wrap up another Fourth Line show. I know what you're thinking. You don't want us to go. The Maple Leafs lost again. Holy moly. They should go get Marc-Andre Fleury to be their goalie.